learn about this great sport that we have. And, without your continued support, we can't bring you these kinds of really great events. And today we're extremely fortunate. I'll get into that in just a second, but just want to thank you all. I want to thank Drew and his team, who always do a great job. And today we have a special guest, and with us in the house is Tim Jacobs. Tim is a native of Michigan, and he's a fly fisherman and fly tyer from the Roaring Fork Valley. He's guided that whole valley, guided in steamboat, is Federation Fly Fishing certified, casting instructor, just a very accomplished player in our trade. And we're just very fortunate to have. And, one of the things that I was hoping we get to talk about at lunch is you being a football coach. So, that's kind of near and dear to my heart. But we'll talk about that soon enough. But today, it's Tim Jacobs. And got a couple questions I want to ask you, Tim. Okay. So when did you start fly fishing?
I started in the late 70s. I started fishing with my grandfather when I was a kid. Okay. But he passed away when I was 14, so I had a little period. And my dad he fished a little, but it wasn't a passion. Right. So we did a few outings, and then it was kind of in my late teens that I came to fly fishing, and it was one of those things where it just really bit me hard and fast from the very beginning.
It does.
I don't think I spent more than 2 weeks being a casual fly fisherman. Yeah. Awesome. And then from there, it just kind of grew. I was in Michigan and did my fishing there. Got a teaching job up near Steamboat Springs, and so I had my summers to guide. And I've been really, really fortunate, I think, to have been acquainted with and mentored by just some of the really great people in our sport. So that it just kind of grew from there. I've been demo tying now for probably close to 20 years.
Wow. How long have you been tying, period? When did you start?
I started tying almost immediately in the early 80s in Steamboat. Okay. I started tying for the shop. I spent one winter tying nothing but Henryville caddis. Oh, wow. All winter. All winter long. But it grooved in certain things, that I still benefit from today. So I've been tying that, and I used to go back to Michigan, and with my grandfather, I was a bass fisherman, so I had that kind of in my roots, and I think Dave Whitlock's book and an article by Tim England, who's a deer hair tyer, and Dave Whitlock's book, Handbook of Bass Fishing, were the things that kind of pulled me back the warm water direction. Okay. And then that just kind of hooked me pretty fast too. Nice. So I've been kind of on this 2-track trout and warm water for a long time.
Nice. So this is one we won't let you out unless you give us this answer. We need the longitude and latitude of your favorite fishing hole. No. Where's your favorite place to fish?
I will tell, I'll come right out. Well, I guess my home waters would be the frying pan. That's no secret, right? I mean, I fish the frying pan, I guided on it. And, I don't have any trouble giving it up to the guides and the tourists in the summertime when I go back to Michigan. Obviously, my home lake of Lake George is not a secret. There's cottages and homes all around it, but it's a very good bass lake. It's a spring-fed lake, so it's a very clear water lake, and even with all the activity around it, it still has a really good population of bass. But then up in the Upper Peninsula, up in Hiawatha National Forest, there's a series of little lakes. One of them is McKeever, and I don't mind telling you this because I doubt anybody's going to go there. But it's a musky lake with some smallmouth in it. So it's beautiful. There's not a cabin on it. Most days I only share it with the loons. And that's kind of one of my favorite. The UP is one of my favorite places. And in Clare County, where I fish, I've got probably 15, 20 lakes within a half-hour drive. Some of them are very wild with very little development on it, and some of them have a fair amount of development on it.
Nice.
So there's my fishing spots.
There you go. So last question, and then I'll let you show us some of your tricks in the trade and your gifts. When you're not fly fishing, when you're not fly tying, what else? What do you like to do?
Well, you know, I mean, photography, that's tied into a lot of my fishing, because the book, I photographed the whole book.
Oh.
So I like that. You know, I like to cook. I dabble in watercolors. I'm not real great at it, but I enjoy doing it when I have time. And then, but first and foremost, probably just being with family and doing family stuff. Yeah.
Good. So were you on the offensive or defensive side of the ball?
Defensive.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
I'll let you.
I was our defensive coach. Yeah, I could tell you stories, but
yeah. Well, I'll let you. I know coaching junior high, there's a lot of them.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I coached for 28 years.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
So a lot of kids, a lot of fun.
Well, show us what you got. I'm looking forward to it. I know.
Well, I know. I don't know. I'm going to do a big deer hair bass bug just for the fun of doing it. I thought, though, maybe what I might do here is let me talk a little bit about hair before we start. The bug I'm going to tie is going to be elk. So really there's about 3 kinds of hair that you can tie with. Which would be the better camera to show this, the one in front or the side one? Which camera do you want me to show? Side, front, does it matter?
Oh, right.
Okay, so elk hair. One of the things about elk hair, when you look at it, you know, it doesn't have as defined of tips as deer has. Typically, although this is a pretty bright yellow, this is elk. The hair itself is a little coarser than deer. The tips are a little different, and it tends to be a little darker, so when it dies, although this is a nice bright color, I have other yellows that the yellow's a lot more muted in it. Here's another example of elk, and I like elk for my bigger patterns because it's a pretty tough hair. You know, you can put a lot of pressure on it with, and I'll talk about threads and stuff later. The other hair I use, and this is probably the most predominant hair, one of the things you should be able to see on this is you can see how the tips are more defined. You can see the markings on the tips. The hair, I don't know if you can see that in the camera, the hair is a lot finer and softer. I would say for the vast majority of the deer hair bass bugs, I'm using this stuff. I tend to go to the elk hair for bigger flies, and I'm tying a bigger one today. The other advantage elk has, it's longer. So when you're tying larger flies, you got a little more length of the hair to work with. And the third hair I work with that I love, and I'll pull out a couple examples here, I'm going to use it maybe a little later, is deer whitetail. And most of this hair, by the way, this deer hair is white, most of it's whitetail. And most of the really good whitetail hair comes from southern Michigan, northern Ohio, those kind of places. And you can see, you know, this is a great piece of hair right here. This is also pretty late season hair because it's long. But then whitetail also have belly hair. And the nice thing about belly hair is it's white. So when you dye it, you get these unbelievably vibrant colors like this yellow. And I mean, I've got a tub of this stuff at home that's all kinds of colors, but the colors are really bright. So if you see a fly that has pretty bright colors on it, it's probably been tied with belly hair. The downside of belly hair, or not downside, one of the considerations, it's not very long. So it doesn't work well for really big patterns. So anyway, that's kind of just a quick rundown of the hair. By the way, I don't process any of my own hair. I buy it all from fly shops, and Nature's Spirit is as well. I'm on Nature's Spirit Pro Staff, so that's where I get all my hair from. Okay, so anyway, let's do I'm just going to do kind of a standard sort of feather tail bass bug here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a file. You don't have to do this, but I'm just going to rough up this area on my hook right here. And what I'm doing is I'm just trying to put a little bit of a tooth into the hook. And I get so much stuff going, I lose things. Where's my Zap-A-Gap? I know I set it out here. There it is, laying down. Okay, so I'm gonna brush that area with a little bit of Zap-A-Gap. And then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna wrap, and I'm using, this is a UTC black 140 DNR thread. It's equivalent to about a 3/0. I think of it as like Danville 3/0 would work for this. So the reason I did the little bit of filing and the little bit of glue was because this tail is going to be, I'm going to be pushing deer hair, the hair body against it. So I want it really anchored in place. So that's kind of how I'm going to start this. Also, if you look, this is a Tiemco 8089 number 2 hook. So if you look right here, you can see I've dropped the bobbin straight below the hook, and it's just about, I could get a wrap or two, there we go. It's just, there it is, right at the point of the hook. So when you think about where you're going to tie your tail in, you think about the point of the barb to the point of the hook. Just sort of imagine that distance right there and then transfer that distance up to there. And that's where I'm going to put my entire tail. And I'm going to leave this front part of the shank for the body. Okay? So,
Hey, Tim,
yes.
What fly is this that you're tying?
I'm tying, it's just a big deer hair, I guess technically elk hair bass bug. It's just a very standard feather tail bass bug, kind of in the, the style of Whitlocks, hair bugs, going back to the old cork bugs with the feather tails. Okay. Yeah, it's just a pretty standard popper. It's going to be a popper. And I'll talk about fishing it kind of as I go too. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm using, this is Whiting Super Boo, and I'm going to put a little bit of center feather in there. And what I'm doing is I'm matching the color. This bug is going to have kind of a cream or cream colored belly, and it's going to have kind of yellow midline with some gray spots, black outline gray spots on it. All right, so this material here, the reason I put this stuff in is I'm just trying to add some texture and movement to this fly, because when you fish these guys, a lot of times you'll cast them in a bass pond, you cast them up, you drop your rod tip, tighten up to them, just give them one little twitch and let them sit. And that noise is enough that a lot of times it'll attract the fish to come over and look. And if the fly's got some natural movement in it, that's a lot of times when they sip up and they'll grab it. You don't hardly have to retrieve it. So I'm going to work materials in here that's going to give me a lot of movement. So I'm going to measure this, and one of the things you're going to see me do with most of these materials is I pre-cut. So I'm going to look at that right there, cut it, and now I'm going to start the thread at the back of the tie-in area, but I'm going to take this right here and match it to the front, and then I'm going to wrap this forward. And then come back. All right, so that kind of is where I'm starting. Now, one of the things I want to work to do, we'll see if I accomplish it or not, is I want to leave this little thing here as I build materials. I don't want to run my thread off the front of this, because then what will happen is threads and materials begin sliding down that little cone shape, and I'll start encroaching on my deer hair area. So I'm going to work to try and keep this open. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little complementary flash. Clear water lakes, don't overflash your flies if you're fishing clear water. If you're fishing stained water, you can add a lot more flash to the fly. I tend to flash, I don't put a ton of flash on them. So now I'm going to run the thread to the front of the hook shank, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap my flash should be around the thread and drop it in here like that. Then I'm just going to come and get kind of a soft loose wrap, and then I'm just going to push that flash kind of around that feather a little bit. Now I go ahead and wrap it to the back. And then see, it's kind of encompassing that feather a little bit more. Now I'm going to go to my mid color, and I'm going to, this is also, this one is a white Chickaboo dyed a cream color, and they come in. I could do white too. This one though is a Grizzly dyed yellow, so it's got a little Grizzly marking on it. So again, same kind of thing. I'm just gonna come in here and kind of meld that back in there. And then again, put my thread at the back, line that up in front, and come in and wrap that color in. Okay, and all I'm doing here is I'm kind of mirroring the colors. The colors of the body of the bug, from the belly up to the back, is kind of what I'm doing with this. Let me find a good one here, gray. Same thing, just kind of come and measure it out there. And wrap it in, work at maintaining that little tuft of hair there in the front. And so there's this little bit of feather there. So that does a couple things. One, as I said, it gives texture. The other thing it does for me is when I put my feathers on the side to kind of what I think of as represent legs, it's going to provide some separation for those, okay? So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do some legs. And what I'm using for my legs, this is whiting black laced hen. And you want the capes, not the saddles. The saddles, the feathers are short and round. The capes are nice and long. You don't have to use these. The main thing you want in these feathers is you want something that's got a lot of webbing in it. If you use a feather, and I've got one here, this is an example. I'm going to use this later to clean out my eye and my hook. There's an American whiting cape feather, but notice how there's very little webbing. Notice how when I stroke it back like that, there's just not a lot of webbing in it. And if I look at one of these guys, the feather almost looks solid. You know, if you look at this feather, notice how, I mean, that feather has a lot of webbing in it. So what's going to do is when it gets wet, it's going to stand up and provide a better silhouette. So let me pull a couple here. And there's no, you know, I don't really think bass are that discerning about color and all that stuff. A lot of what I do with these flies are for me. I will definitely admit that. If you are one of those ultra practical tiers that want simple, easy patterns, I tie those, but I'm not tying them right now. Let me get two more of these guys. Then this might not be it, because I could tie some very simple, just nothing but natural deer hair bugs and probably catch as many fish. All right, so I picked 6 feathers. I'm going to do 6 feathers. I'm going to do 3 on a side. And kind of the way I arrange these, let me match these up. I don't know if you're going to see this. Because the feather's curved, I can lay it on the curve of my leg and just match the tips up. And then kind of marry them together. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so the curve is going to go out. So the inside feather is white, that's matching the belly, and the outside color is yellow, and that's going to be the predominant color here. Sometimes I'll do 3 color feathers, sometimes just 2. This one I'm just going to do 2. Now this one I'm not going to pre-cut. And the reason I'm not is because I want the thread to gather all these fibers, because it'll help to make the tail a little fuller, a little more robust. Also, I'm going to measure these out so that I got about 2 shank lengths to maybe 2 1/4, and lay that in there. And now what you want to do is you want to come in here, and the thread is at the back of that tie-in area right now. So I'm going to come with just a couple loose wraps and then pull it in tight. Get a couple more wraps on top of that. And make sure my feathers don't turn. And so there's one side right there. So you can see I did clip it here right at the front though, so I'm still keeping that area clean. So let's do this one. So now this one, all you're going to do is take the feather, take those tips and just match the tips up and hold them tight and then come forward with it. Come in with a couple loose wraps, tighten it up, a couple more, and there we go. So come in right at that front, trim it, and then I'll wind this forward to once again kind of create that tie-in space. Kind of keep that. There we go. So ideally, you want a nice, nice splay, nice V splay to the feathers there. Okay, then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a Hackle collar on this. So again, I'm just using some whiting American Hackle, and I'm just kind of going to do a little blend of colors here that kind of tie into my color scheme. Okay, so let's come back here and all right. So on a bass bug, it's not a dry fly, like a Catskill dry. The measurement isn't that big. Probably a gape to, and I don't want anything that's like too crazy big. Although it wouldn't matter because they just sweep back. I don't think it'd matter in the way of fish, but just, I don't know, aesthetically, I kind of like it to be about at a gape, maybe a little more. So let me find some feathers. I just eyeball them, I don't gauge them out. But let me look here. Yeah, that's probably about right. And get another one here. About the same place. Yep. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to come in here and do the same. Okay, so I got my feathers for my Hackle collar, so I'm just going to put them together here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to trim them, pull that back just a little bit, and snip and snip. Create this little bit of a brush. You could strip them down to the quill if you wanted. It doesn't. I don't think that matters. This is one way of putting in Hackle. Also, I put the Hackle in, so you can. If you put the Hackle in, you can see the curve in it. And dry flies are the same way. There's the underside of the feather. There's the top of the feather. If you mount them so that you're wrapping it with the curve forward, then the hackles are going to go forward. That's dry fly style of hackling. If you mount them so as you wind them, the hackles go back. That's wet fly style. And I'm going to mount them wet fly style, even though, again, I don't think it matters. You could put it the other way. I mean, they're going to get wet and they're going to sweep back anyway. And I doubt that a bass is going to look at your fly and go, oh, no, you did that dry fly style. I'm not eating that fly. All right, next thing I'm going to do, just to kind of help make these flies a little more durable, is I'm going to use a little Dave's Flex Cement, which really isn't it's goop thinned with toluene is what it is. Okay, so the day's flex cement that existed in that bottle has been gone for a long time. I just keep replenishing it with a little dab of that, and I put a little toluene's pretty toxic though if you decide to use it. I keep mine out in the garage with a little eyedropper and I add it that way. So, and I want to keep this thin. This is actually starting to get a little thick. I want it pretty thin, almost maybe just a little thicker than water. And then I'm just going to put a little bit right on those thread wraps there. Yeah, and if you do use toluene, use it in a well-ventilated space. You don't want to be breathing it. Okay, now let's wrap some Hackle. Okay, now this is the part where you really want to kind of be conscious of trying to maintain that tie-in area and not let this Hackle slip over the edge here. So I'm just going to kind of come through, wrap that, and I'll just kind of one wrap there, maybe one more. And all I'm doing is kind of building a nice little robust Hackle collar here. Just kind of a transition between the hair body of the bug and the tails. And you can see I'm not crowding that front end too much. And it doesn't take a lot of thread wraps. You're pushing it down into that flex cement. Flex cement takes a little while to cure, but it'll help kind of hold things in place. And then wrap my last feather here. Maybe get one more, there we go. Trim my tips out. Couple wraps. And come in front here and do a little thread. Okay. So there's the tail. There's the tail of the fly. You can see the splay on it. You can see the thread wraps on it. And I will say I do these in steps. When I sit down and do bass bugs, I may sit down and do a dozen or more tails. Just do a whole bunch of tails, let that flex cement cure in there, and then come back later and do the deer hair part. But since we are moving along today, we're just going to keep on going. All right, so now let's do some deer hair work. So the first thing I'm going to do, anytime I have Hackle or any kind of complicated tail of any kind, I'm going to sweep it back and I'm going to put a thread band on there. This is simply to keep all that stuff out of the way. That's all I'm doing. I'll come back at the end of the fly and I will cut that thread band out and let that Hackle collar kind of come back up in shape. But you'll see as I start working deer hair and trimming deer hair that if I had that Hackle collar sitting up there, I'd cut a bunch of it out. All right, so now let's talk about threads for deer hair, for most deer hair. This is a gel spun thread, GSP. It's very slippery thread. It's the best stuff for hair, and I'll tell you why. Your alternatives are nylon-based threads. If you use a 140 thread, you break the thread before it cuts the hair. Okay, so and you don't want to get halfway through one of these bodies and break thread. If you go to a heavy enough thread, like say a 280, UTC 280, which is real heavy nylon thread, then you got a really heavy, thick thread that you're wrapping this in. So gel spun is just the best. This is a 130 denier gel spun. It's a UTC. This one I'm going to use later is a lighter weight, and it's a Vivus does gel spun. So there's a few of them out there. You want to use somewhere in that range of 130 to 150 for most deer hair stuff. I have some 200 for doing these crazy big things that I don't fish that much, but I tie them now and then. But here's the thing about this. Let me just do a quick demo here. There's a wax nylon thread. So if I come here on my hook shank and I do what's called a jam knot, a couple wraps, notice that it sticks. It doesn't go anywhere, okay? With gel spun, if I do the same thing, couple wraps, notice it just slides right off. It's very slippery. And so what you've got to do is you've got to pair it up with some Zap-A-Gap. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to brush this area with a little zap. And then I'm going to start my thread in front of the glue and wrap back into it. I'm going to wrap quite a ways back in here. This had this little tie down area got a little bigger than I wanted it to be. So I'm going to have to get my hair back into that a little bit. So now that's anchored in there. And now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a thread base. You can kind of build a thread base as you go, or you can just kind of do it ahead of time. All right, so that's about where I want to start. Okay, so now let's do hair work. So again, this is going to be, with the exception of the gray, this is going to all be elk hair. And then I'm going to use, because I got, this is gray elk, but I like this lighter gray better. I think it looks a little better. So I'm going to go with the deer. And you can mix and match these hairs, by the way. It doesn't really matter. So let's go ahead and get this piece of bleach hair. So I've cut that out. The other thing you got to do, if you've never worked with deer hair before, you got to comb out that under fur. Is your focus right here at my hook shank?
Yeah.
So when I push it forward, it goes out of focus?
Right.
Okay, gotcha. So I'm not doing a collar, deer hair collar on this. If I was, I would stack this and then, you know, maintain the collar. I'm not doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab it like this and turn it over. I snip the front and back and come back, and you see I've got the butts trimmed out. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this in at about a 45-degree angle. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do 2 wraps, and then on my 3rd wrap, now here's the trick to this. Notice, do you see the hair flaring just as I'm just giving this the slightest little tug. And you see the hair start to flare. So the trick to this is you want the tension right up to the point where the hair is wanting to start to flare, but it's not flaring yet. If you're too loose, when you go to flip it around, the hair slides around and doesn't go in place where you want it. If it's too tight, the hair will start to distribute around the hook shank, and I'm going to show you that later with another fly. So now I'm going to come and I'm just going to roll that to the bottom, put my thumb on it, and flare it. And if you do it right, you should end up with just the hair sitting on the bottom of the hook shank. It shouldn't be really anywhere else. This, by the way, is called a stacking technique. It's not really, a lot of times we say spinning deer hair. This is not really spinning deer hair. This is what I consider stacking and flaring deer hair. So now I'm going to come in here and same thing. Now I'm just going to lay this right here. I'm going to come around, come through once. Notice I'm going to get the thread right in the same spot. Come through, then hold it in place and flare it. So it's right there. Ideally, I guess I should have gotten that a little more even, but so.
Tim?
Yeah.
That clump you put on top, did you put it at a 45? Or
No, I just paralleled the hook shank. Let me take it out and do it again. I'll do it again. Yeah, one of the things too, let me back up in one of the things too is right here, notice this is where the thread wraps are. I'm not wrapping forward through the hair. That's another misconception about working with deer hair, is you wrap forward through the hair, and you really never do that. Not for hopper heads, not for any reason. Okay, so let's do this. This time I'm going to try to balance it a little better. Okay, so I'll comb it out. I'm just combing it out is all I'm doing. Got a little comb. Come in, trim the butt square, trim the tip square. Now, I'm going to lay this right on top of the hook shank, just right parallel to the hook shank. And then I'm going to come around, get 2 wraps, and flare it. And even then I had a little more at the back than I had at the front, but that's okay, it won't matter. Okay, and now I'm going to start doing things that the bass don't care one whit about. I'm going to start putting colors and stuff in here. All right, so now I'm going to take just a little bit of black. And this is when you guys see deer hair bass bugs that are different colors, have multiple colors in them. This is how it's done. So I'm going to lay that right in that space there. Come in here, same thing, 2 wraps right through that very same plane, not forward or backward. I'm going to flare that right there. Okay, so if I were to leave that, if I were to leave that, that would be a little black spot in my bug. But I'm instead going to make it a little ring, and I'm going to put a gray spot on my bug instead. And one of the things to be careful of when you do this is that these clumps of hair here, don't do huge clumps, because what will happen with deer hair, let me put that in there. What will happen with deer hair is deer hair wants to distribute itself evenly around the hook shank. So if you start putting these big clumps of hair, they'll start sliding like this on you. You'll have one clump over this way and one clump over one way and one clump over the other way. And they'll start sliding around on you. So don't do a lot. So now I'm going to come back in here. And now here's another little move you want to kind of do. Okay, so I want to get this thread to the front. You want to do it under tension, because otherwise if you just kind of throw it up there, you'll grab hair and fold it over. So if you pull that back and put a little tension on it and bring it up, you can wrap it around and get it to the front. And my very fancy, expensive half-hitch tool. Okay, actually you want a pen cap, or you want a pen body in some ways, because a lot of times there's a lot of half-hitch tools, like I've got a little half-hitch tool on the end of that. First of all, it's not big enough to go over the hook eye, and 2, it only goes back so far. And I have a set of half-hitch tools, but they only go so far. This is just kind of the cheapest, easiest way to do this. So I'm going to put just a couple half hitches right there. Now this one's not going to compress very much, but I'm going to compress it. This is my hair packing tool. And you may not have seen this one around because they're not around very much. This guy down in Texas makes them very small scale. But I think they're a great tool. I'm hoping they'll kind of scale up and you'll start seeing it in fly shops. But it's got a little groove on the inside, and when you close it, can you see that in camera? When you close it, it's got a very small opening. But on the inside, the hook eye, the hook eye can travel back and forth. What you want to do, okay, let's talk about packing hair a little bit. So let's imagine these fingers are the hair and my knuckles are the hook shank, all right? When you push hair back and you pack it, what we call packing it, sometimes you see these tools that are like just big, round tools that push. And what it does, it pushes the hair like this, okay? It pushes it back like that. What you want to do is you want a tool that's going to come down to the hook shank and actually connect to that knot and push the hair like this. That's what's really going to pack it, because then it's going to actually move along the hook shank and stay in place and be denser. So you got to have the right kind of packing tool. You want a packing tool that's going to come right there at the base. And I didn't get much out of that, but you'll see in the next bunch, you'll see that I'll get a little more. So now let me just kind of speed up a little bit here. And let's get the thread just a little forward. So now I'm going to come in, lay it in here, get a couple of wraps like that. I'm at that 45, roll it to the bottom. Oops, I see I got some yellows even with it. Let me get that out. Okay, so now roll it to the bottom and flare it in place. Okay. This is made by the Fly-Rite company. It's fly-tight glue. It's a non-toxic. It's flexible. That's the thing about it. So you can make but you don't have to add glue, but if you want to make them a little more durable, you can put a little glue down in there at the base, and that'll help kind of glue those bodies in and make them a little bit more durable. Now I got to get the needle back in here. There we go. Okay, so now take my yellow. Again, I'm just laying that in. Now this goes out in a little angle, but again, it's still just right along the hook shank. Flare it in place. Get a little bit of black. Very small amount of black. Black's just kind of a little accent color here. And then come get a little gray. Yeah, a little bit more than that. I'll probably do it. Again, I want to put that gray right in the center of the black. Come in here, flare it, push it back, bring my thread forward, a couple half hitches. Now I'll come in here with my packing tool, push up in there and push it back. And hopefully you can see that one went back. The further out you come on the hook shank, the more you're going to be able to compress that hair. All right, let's do all that again. Roll it. That one did pretty good. That one rolled with no problem. Put it, flare it right there. Little glue. Jeez. This is like proving challenging. Come on, get in there. Whoops. You know, I don't have these problems at home. Well, so actually I do. Okay, I give up. I'll get it later. All right, yellow. Lay the yellow in there. Come in. Flare it. Now I get a little bit of black. Get some gray. Okay. Bring my thread to the front and my whip finishes. And now we should see when I do the pack this time, it should, yeah, see I got maybe a millimeter or so of space on my hook shank there. So now, let's do it once more.
As you've worked your way forward with those bottom bundles, are you making them any smaller or stay pretty consistent?
They stay pretty consistent. I try to get 4 stacks on this big a hook. Small hooks, maybe 3. And then at the end, you got to kind of come to this point where at the end you adjust and see where you're at. Yeah, and we'll see where this one comes out, you know. I'm not a commercial fly tyer, so I don't tie I don't just sit and, you know, do this all day long. So consequently, you know, the more I tie them, the more I dial it in. But normally I have to do a little adjustment at the end, and I'll show you what I mean to get the, you know, the right size. You know, you want to, you know, to get your eye of your hook and your thread head and all that. Okay. A little bit of black. And then some gray. And if you're just perfect on the amount of hair you grab each time, when you finish this, you'll have just the right amount of space for your thread head at the end. But we'll see once I pack it. Right now it's right up tight, but that's because I haven't packed it yet. When I pack it, I'll get some movement there in it. And actually that's pretty good. Well, what happened in here is if I pushed it back and I had more than the sort of the standard in fly tying is your thread head should be about the size, about the size of the diameter of your hook eye. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Can you focus in on that? So you can see I got a nice little space there. If it's too much, I would come in, I just put a little bit of hair. I'd try to catch a little bit of hair, swing it to the bottom. I just do a little cream colored, a little bleached hair, and then a little yellow on top and put it on top. But this is not too bad. So let's see, did I get a good half hitch in there? I did. Okay, so now you have to, just like you started, you have to finish this thread with a little zap-a-gap. Otherwise, the knot won't hold, or you'll have to do so many wraps that it'll be kind of ridiculous. So I'm going to apply it to the thread. Don't apply it in there, just apply it to the thread. And then come in and wrap it, pull your hair back and get some wraps in there. And then come in and do a couple half hitches on it. Maybe one more. There we go. And I'll do one more pack on it. So you can kind of see the density in it. There's the belly. There's the back. So we'll have some nice colors, some nice spots and things. One of the things I'm noticing on this right at the moment, let's see if I can correct it a little bit, is do you see how this spot right here has slid over a little bit? So I'm going to try and take that and rebalance it a little bit. I'm going to try to take that and kind of slide it back that way a little bit to get it up on top. You've got that glue down in there, but it hasn't tightened up yet. So you can kind of adjust things to kind of line stuff up. Whoops, that was too much adjustment. Don't want to do that. There, now it's a little more, now you can probably see, can you see it's a little more lined up? All right, now, here's the part where I really, really wished I knew about this when I wrote this book, because I think this is brilliant. Take my pencil, get yourself some cardstock. This is just a student grade watercolor paper is all it is, but it's any cardstock. And have a little template. Okay, one thing nice about the template is I can create any shape I want. I'm going to keep it a little rounder, but these are a bit of an oval. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick one that is about, can you see the hook through that? I don't know. What I'm going to do, I'm going to pick this one right here, because if I lay that into the hook, that's going to be about the size of the hook gape, I think. Let me check that again. Yeah. And it's going to be real simple. I'm just going to come here and make sure I got that one. Trace it with my pencil. And then I'm going to take, not my hair scissors, my good scissors. I'm going to take another pair of scissors, and here, let's just cut that out. All I'm doing is I'm cutting that oval out. A lot of bugs you'll see, guys just trim them right flat to the hook shank, like a flat bottom. I don't like that. You need to have some hair in the bottom of the hook. And when I fish these, I just treat the top of the hook with floatant and let the bottom of the bottom soak up some water. So then so that you got that weight is under the hook shank along with the bend of the hook. This fly will land upright every time you cast it. Every time. I mean, you can cast it, boom, tighten, but you don't have to mess around trying to flip it over because it's landed upside down. Now, the other thing I'm going to do, so in order to accomplish that, when I come down in here, I'm going to poke a hole in here to put through the eye of my hook. So I'm going to come about 1/3 of the way up. I'm going to keep it on a center line and come up about 1/3 of the way up. And I'm just going to use my scissors. Maybe a little lower, there we go. And I'm just going to try to, yeah, there we go. Put a little hole in that thing. Then I'm going to come here in the front and I'm going to pop that on so it looks like that. Okay? Now, this made trimming so much faster for me. It was like crazy how fast I can trim out a bug using this method. So I've got, this is you don't need to necessarily have one of these. It's a razor blade holder, but for this particular method, it really works. And what it does is as you tighten it, this is a pretty good one. See how it's curving the blade? So I'm going to put a little bit of curve on the blade. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to push, just gently push back, boom. And just follow that template all the way around. And what I'm working on doing is I'm working on making sides that are parallel horizontal sides at the moment. Just kind of come back. And you can see how fast I got a really nice ovalized cylinder. I mean, it just happened really quick. Oh, I see. Let me grab my, I see I did actually fold some hair over here on the bottom. Okay, this is a good opportunity to look. Can you see the folded hair that's tucked up in there? It happens. It happens. I mean, it won't affect the fishability of the fly. Just come in and pick it out. The bad thing about it, I mean, ideally you don't want that because it leaves a little bit of a gap. The hair in that spot is not quite as dense then. But I'm just kind of picking that fold out. Yeah, okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to take this off now. It's kind of served its purpose.
If you were at home instead of in front of a camera, would you pick that out?
Pick that out?
What
yeah.
you just did there?
Yes, I would.
For your own use?
Just because I'm like a little obsessive compulsive. Yeah. I have at home occasionally, I will tie something and it's just like, oh my God, this is ugly. And I'll take a single edge like from the hardware store and chop it off and tie it again. I'm like, no, I'm not having that fly in my box. So I am a little bit compulsive. Okay, so you remember the wrap we put on the tail. This is where it comes into play. See, I can come in here with my scissors, go to that wrap, push up against the back, and I'm just gonna come around and trim the back of the bug body right now, just all the way around. Get a nice trim on it with my scissors. Yeah, I mean, I'll be the first to admit, you know, most of what I'm doing right now, all the colors and all that, it's, you know, bass, I think the texture stuff I put in the fly is real important. That's what the bass react to. I've yet to decide that bass are like, oh, I'm fishing a yellow bug and they're not eating it, so I think I'll switch to a, you know, white bug or something, and suddenly they start eating. They don't. They react to movement, and what they are, like any other fish, you don't want to spook them, you know. I mean, you got to work your way quietly along. I mean, they're like trout, you know, you don't go thrashing into the river. You know, at least I don't know how you guys approach a river, but I intentionally don't string my rod at the car. I go down to the edge of the river and sit down and string it and kind of watch the river while I'm doing that. Same thing with bass. You don't want to go charging in. We have back there in Clare County, they have a little bass club. And you can tell the guys who are the good fishermen, because I've gone down to the boat ramp occasionally and wash them way out. The good guys come cruising along the shore real slow, and then they cut their motor and they come into shore nice and quiet. Every now and then you get these guys who they've spent a lot of money on their bass boat, and they got this real NASCAR mentality, and they're charging down the lake. I mean, they are on plane, going as fast as the boat will go. They come up into shore, they crank the wheel, shut the engine down, jump up, kick their motor in, and start casting. I've never yet seen those guys catch a fish on the first cast or two. It's like, no, guys. But, you know, each to his own. They got a big boat, why not have fun with it? Okay, so now I'm gonna come to a razor blade, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna start putting some tapers in this. I'm just gonna come along the top, taper that side, come in here, put a little taper in that way, put a little taper in this way. I'm kind of not going real deep. So now I kind of look at it, I'm kind of trying to balance those tapers out a little bit so they kind of have the same angle. Coming back. And now what I'm going to do, okay, so can you see there's a corner right there, right? See that edge? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come this, rather than coming this way, I'm going to come this way, and I'm just going to kind of come across and take that little edge out and just round it out. And then I'll just keep right on going around to the other side, round it out. Now I'm going to flip it over. I may have gotten a little deep on my top cut there, but that's okay, it won't hurt anything. Okay, now I've got to open up my hook shank, okay? So I'll do kind of the same thing here. Same thing here. And I'm going to tell you what, this is a point where you, depending on what kind of how obsessive compulsive perfectionist you are, you can sit and play with it. I can tell you right now, one of the things I don't like about what I did is I went too deep in my cut there. That would bug me, but I'm just gonna let it go for the moment. It won't affect the way the fly fishes at all, I guarantee you. So now I'm gonna check my front. Okay, so let me show you something else here.
Tim?
Yes.
So you switch from your razor blade tool to just
holding a razor blade, yeah. I only use
you use the tool to do all of that?
I could. I have used the tool longer, and you could, but as long as I'm working this direction, okay, the tool doesn't work going this way very well, because even at its lowest setting, the blade's still got a little bit of a curve on it. Yeah. Okay. So now let me look at this again. So, can you see the little point over on this corner right there? Okay. So what I do with these is I look at the front, and I take out those little corners. So, you know, when I look around here, I'm seeing the front of this fly, and I'm going to just kind of very gently work along that edge, taking just a little bit out. Check it again. Now it's getting a pretty good, I got a little high spot there and a little high spot there. And really, this is now getting down to just about. The other thing I don't do too with these, you'll see guys who will glue the front sides of these things to make them pop more. They'll use like a UV resin of some kind. Throw some in there, hit it with a light, and it'll have a hard face on it so it'll really pop. You can do that. I don't. I like flies to fish a little bit softer. This one, it'll still pop, but it'll also kind of bulge more sometimes, especially as it gets wet. All right, so now, let me just clean that up a little bit, pack that back, make room. Now I'm going to come back in and find this always happens to me, I lose things. Here we go. I'm going to put a red thread head on that. And my thread, I need to thread my bobbin. So, and this is something I always do too. I always I come back and do a UTC nylon thread head over top of the gel spun, and that just helps me, it just helps to make the fly a little more durable. Oh, whip finish tool. Yeah, I took a too deep a cut to start with. I don't like that, but oh well. Okay, now where'd it go? Yeah, I'll use my scissors. Actually, I better use my scissors, it won't smell it out. I got a little tool, a little cauterizing tool that I make eye holes with, and I thought I brought it with me, but I'm not going to spend time looking for it. I'm just going to trim out a little socket here for the eye. I kind of like the little tool, but it really smells bad. I get a hard time from, well, I'll be doing these and suddenly I'll hear my office door get closed. My wife will go, now you just open your window, will you? Because it does smell bad. I had a guy at a show once who was a surgeon came up and said, oh, it smells just like surgery here. So apparently cauterizing in surgery smells like cauterizing deer hair, I guess. All right, now legs and eyeballs are the last thing here. Okay, here we go. All right, so let's do legs first. Oh, you know what I forgot? I just realized I sat down and looked. Okay, I don't know if I can do this without a knife. Let's see if I can work them down in there. This stuff is pretty tough. Normally I take this stuff and thread it through with a needle and put a little glue on it, but I might be able to thread it down through the hair. Let's see if I can do that. I even sat down at my time bench and did a search today and went down to if I've forgotten anything. You know, like I said, you got to do a couple of these. Let's see, am I going to be able to get that in there? Oh, I don't know. No, that's not one to. Well, maybe, I don't know. Of course, it's putting a big dent in it. Like I said, normally I'll thread these through with a needle, and I apologize, I forgot a needle. But this leg material, this is this FlexiFloss stuff, and it's just tough stuff. I think I'm getting it worked down in there.
So you would just take the needle and go in?
I would thread this in, and then I just thread it through the body and pull it out the other side. Yeah, and I apologize, I forgot that needle. This is not as neat as what it would normally be. That I definitely it's definitely pushed some hair down that normally would not be down. But anyway, this might help though, because I glue it too. And once I put the glue on, that helps to make it move a little bit better until the glue dries up. Again, I'm going to use this Days Flex Cement on this and just brush the near side here. And then pull that in. There we go. That kind of allowed it to move a little better. There we are. Okay. Yeah, they did create a little slot there. All right, so now I'm going to put the eyeballs in. So I'm going to use my Days Flex Cement. Is that, can you, you good?
So Tim, we've got a question from one of our friends who's laying out on the beach in Maui, Hawaii, Bill Francos. He's asking, in your opinion, how important do you think these eyes are?
I like them.
Good answer. I like it.
You know, they don't matter. You know, you can tie, like I said, everything. The bars, the colors, all of it is for you as a tire. You don't need them.
I kind of wonder about Bill laying on a beach in Maui, Hawaii, wondering about eyes on a bass bug. Come on, Bill. Have another pina colada.
Okay, now I'm putting a little goop in. Remember I told you that the Days Flex Cement and goop are kind of the same thing. So the reason I put the first one in is more for the thinner than the actual glue, because it'll help to kind of draw that down in. It'll make the eyeballs a little tougher. You know, you will knock the eyeballs off after a while. Yeah, boy, I really do not like the top of this fly, but see, now this is one that I would never have finished out at home. I would have went, oh no, I can't have this. I would have lopped that body off and made a new body, respun the hair. Oh, I'm going to tell you, the bass don't care.
It'll catch fish.
They don't
Absolutely.
care. No. This thing would fish, and it's got plenty of hair in the bottom, so you know it's going to land right every time. It's got a good face on it. It'll chug and move, and it'll have a lot of movement. The bass don't care. They absolutely don't care. And maybe the last thing I'll do, and this is just a little bit of hard as hell, I'm going to put it on these thread wraps just to kind of finish this out. And then I'm going to use that feather that I had so long ago. Where'd it go? I guess I lost it in this mess. So you don't want that glue to dry. You can use hard as hull. That's a fly tying glue. Hard as nails. You can get that out of the grocery store. Anything just to soak those thread wraps and make them a little tougher. So there it is. Like I said, the body, I got a little too deep on the body. Normally I'd want the body to be a little more curved, but you get a pretty good idea, I guess, of what it looks like. So I'll go ahead and pass that around. You can take a quick look at it.
Looks great. So I got a question for you, Tim.
Okay.
So you're going out to your pond or lake or whatever to fish that. How are you rigging that up on your fly line? What's the
Well-
what's the whole rig look like?
Okay, so that pattern right there is big enough. You're going to want probably even either a 7 or 8 weight. You're going to want a fairly heavy weight forward line, bass bug taper. They make a ton of them now.
Right.
You know, outbound shorts, Rio. I mean, something that's got a good heavy head on it with a running line behind it, because that fly is going to have some weight and wind resistance to it. And then I'm going to use a bass leader. Rio, SA makes them. The bass leaders have heavier butt sections on them than trout leaders do. And I will probably fish that if I'm around not a lot of heavy cover, I'd probably fish it with 3X.
Okay.
And if I was fishing around, particularly if you had like wood, like stumps or something, you're fishing a reservoir and you're in where there were some wood and stumps and something where you really need to like, bam, when that fish hits, I can't let them go very far. I'd drop it down to 0 or 1X.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, 3X is pretty tough stuff. I mean, you can put a lot of pressure on a fish. I tend to fish, well, you know, if you're fishing, if you're really into warm water, as I am, I've got a set of warm water rods. I've got Sage Bass 2 rods. I've got a couple payloads, Sage payloads. I pro deal. Well, I taught casting for Sage for years, so I've been affiliated with them for a long time. And they are Reddington. I just picked up for this summer, I'm kind of going to be curious to use it, was a Reddington butter stick, 8-weight butter stick, because it'd be kind of fun to kind of go old school and throw some glass. And I'm putting one of the new Scientific Angler camo bass bug lines on it. So I haven't even cast it yet, but I'm kind of excited about trying to go back to some glass. I have a real old VPS Sage that's a 9-foot. You know, I mean, most guys, especially if you're up here, you're not probably going to want to buy specialized warm water, so just use your 7-weight or 8-weight. But if you are going to go cast these things, even a standard trout weight forward taper line, you could do it, but it would be a little challenging. You want to get something that's a little more extreme on the weight forward side. And to say bass taper anymore is kind of irrelevant. My God, there's so many tapers out there now that...
So have you fished the 8-weight butter stick yet?
No.
Yeah.
I literally just came in the mail the other day. I've got it all rigged and I've sort of held it in my office, but I
That'll be
haven't
fun.
actually fished it.
That's a shop favorite for creeks and small waters.
Butter
around.
sticks?
Yeah, like in a 2 and a 3-weight.
Oh, well, I have those too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what gave me. Because I had those for trout fishing, and I like them, but I saw this 8-weight, and they had the Reddington guys were promoting it as a flats rod too, which I find really curious. Yeah, they had a picture of a guy fishing it in the flats. Although I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a saltwater guy, so I don't know exactly how that would work. But yeah, so that's how I'd fish. Just standard bass bug lines. Now divers, one of the things I do is I use a lot of clips. Little, like Rio now makes a whole line of little twist clips and stuff. I don't use them on my topwater bugs, but all my diving bugs and pretty much a lot of other stuff I will clip up to get that hinge and movement in the fly. Nice. So, yeah.
Anybody else have any questions for Tim? Spastic, you got a good question for him?
Here. What other colors do you tie them in?
Okay, good question. I'm going to start off that answer by saying, remember, bass don't really care that much about colors, but I tend to group my colors into 3 general groups. You know, it's not like trout fishing where, you know, I'm going to tie an Adams dry fly and I know exactly what the pattern is going to look like, right? Bass bugs are very creative in how you put colors together and stuff like that, but I have what I think of as bright colors. I have a few of these. I'll have chartreuses, yellows, whites, stuff that's bright. Then I'll have dark ones like purple, a natural colored hair bug. Just using natural hair is great. In fact, I tie them like an Adams. The collar will be a mix of grizzly and brown. And then I'll use tan colored legs on them. That's a great pattern. So kind of purple, darker colors. And then I'll do these, what I think of, this one here, I think of as a frog color, where you have a different belly from a back. You kind of differentiate the belly color and the back. And really belly colors are I really probably only use 3, yellow, white, and orange. Because if you think about most of the fish, at least back in the Midwest, the primary forage are panfish. So you think about all the panfish back there, they pretty much either have kind of cream or white colored bellies. Sunfish have yellow colored bellies. Perch and some of the little perch and stuff have a little orange hints on the belly. So those are my 3 belly colors. Beyond that, be creative. Be creative. Put colors together that you like. That's one of the things I do like about bass bugs is you can kind of really let your kind of artistic side come out, and how do you want to combine colors and things. The form of a popper is pretty set. Here's the form, but what goes into it as far as colors and things is pretty flexible. All right.
I have a question on the feathers that you put on that.
Yes.
On the tail, you weren't stripping the hackle, but when you wrap the hackle, you were stripping it. Why are you doing it different?
Well, on this one, when I did the tail, see, if I strip it, okay, I'll pull a feather and I can demo for you. So here's my feather, and now I wrap. So watch what happens. Now I wrap my hook, and look at all the fibers. See if I can change hands here. Look at all the fibers that thread has grabbed up here. Now, if I do this and strip it, you see the difference?
I see the difference, but I'm wondering why you're doing it.
Because I want to gather more of those fibers together to make the tail a little more robust. The other thing too, here's the other thing too. If you strip them and you just tie in the stem, they tend to want to turn around a little more. Where if you, especially these nice webby ones, if you put them together here, a lot of times you can kind of marry them together. You can kind of marry them together, and they'll kind of hold together there. Especially as you start to get several of them together, you can see you're really gathering up a lot of fibers there. And if you want to go to the hackle I wrapped, if I didn't strip those, then I'm going to have a lot of splay. Not that that matters either with these flies, but it would splay around a lot. So I kind of want to make sure I get in and really get a hold of the stem of the feather.
You want them to kind of pack together a little bit more.
Yeah.
When you wrap it.
Yeah. So anytime you're wrapping hackle, you want to either go right down to a strip barb or do like I did, where you trim it out and create that little tiny brush that the thread can kind of grab a hold of. So yeah, good question. Anything else on these before we move on? All right, let's do some trout stuff. Let me clear the boards.
Is that what you put?
No. With bass bugs, topwater, I just do an improved clinch. Because, it's popping, it'll move, it'll do what it needs to do. I could do a uni or a Duncan loop. I've done those before, and they work fine. But, now diving flies are totally different, because you definitely want a loop fly to that. But with these, I just do an improved clinch, because basically they're getting pulled, they're getting pulled pretty much parallel to the surface of the water. Yeah. So, oh, thank you. Good. Okay, now let's do something that, okay, here we go, irresistibles. Let me just move stuff out of the way here. And we will do an irresistible. Let me find my stuff here. no, that's not what I want. Oh no, did I? Oh no, they're up here. Okay, here we go. I was gonna say, I know I packed Irresistible stuff. This always happens to me. I start out organized and then it just turns into a giant mess. All right, there we go. That's what I want. And let's find, do you want kind of a nice little traditional deer hair, or you want me to do kind of a bumblebee one?
Bumblebee.
Bumblebee. I like bumblebee. I'll do bumblebee. It's a little different. I mean, as far as tying them, everything is exactly the same. But, okay, so now, it is. Yeah, I'm a,
Always tied with?
yes, I started tying with Thompson. Collet style vise, and I went to another company's collet style vise, and when I started tying bass bugs, I kept cracking the collets because I was tightening the hooks in, and this was back when I was in Steamboat, and the owner of the shop there that I kind of worked at, and he said, "Why don't you get a Regal?" I still have the original Regal, and then about, I guess 5-6 years ago, they put me on their pro staff, so I know I have all these fancy colored ones and stuff.
Yeah, nice, good looking.
Yeah, I use, I really like the stainless for doing trout. I think it's a great one. This is the standard, and then I use the big game for big hooks. In fact, I could have almost used the big game on that bass bug, but I just decided to bring one vise today rather than two. So, okay. So I am gonna, so normally you can do, I'll do one a little bit bigger here. I'm going to use a Gamakatsu B10S, which is, it's got a bigger gape than a Tiemco 100, but you can do these on Tiemco 100s. I've got them on for trout, I do them on Tiemco 100s. I use this fly for warm water, but I also fish it for trout. So now let's find everything here that I need. All right, so once again, I am going to start with a lighter weight. This is a GSP 75. So I got to use just a little bit of Zap-A-Gap. Okay, now this fly proportions are really important. So I'm going to start here at the halfway point, and I'm going to wrap back through that glue. And then come back up here. So I'm going to put my, and the reason is because I've got to change thread. I have to trim the body out before I hackle it anyway, so I've got to change threads. So I might as well go ahead and just start off with a thread that works well with deer hair. So moose for the tail. So just a few fibers, not very much. Maybe a few more.
That's Colorado moose, right?
Yeah.
Special.
Yeah. It's Hareline moose. I don't know where they get it from. All right, let's see how that looked. It's really got a curve to it.
Sidewinder moose.
We'll get those out of there. Yeah, that'll be okay. All right, so here you go. Here's where we're going to begin our measurements. This is, I don't like that. It's just not stacking up right. Let's try that again, see if I can get those tips a little better. There we go, that looks a little nicer. All right, so my tail is going to be about as long as my body, okay? So I'm going to measure that out, switch hands, slide this back to my tie-in point. Now you can see where my thread is, which should be right about at the halfway point. So I'll come in here and I'll just cut that right like that. Catch it with my thread. Lift the tail up, pull it towards me just a little bit, and wind it back. And then I'm going to take one wrap underneath just to kind of set the tail a little bit. Come forward. Okay. Now,
Does that wrap splay it out a little?
well, this hair is splayed a lot. I don't know, this is just this particular piece of moose. The hair just wants to splay on it. I tried that other piece that was done that did that too. I've had other pieces of moose where the tail stays together. I haven't flared it at all, but it's flaring. What the wrap underneath does is it sets the tail up like this a little bit, rather than having it start to go down. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, okay, so now I'm going to do two pieces of hair on this, okay? And I've got to do it in this halfway point. So what I want to do is, what you got to do is you got to think about, so come to there's the halfway point on that tie down area, right? Okay, so I'm going to put one piece of hair in front of that and one piece of hair behind it. So I'm going to come to what I guess would be the 1/4 point on the tail. And then I'm going to come in here. Don't take a lot. I'm going to do a little white here, a little white butt. Then I got to comb it out. Okay. Now here's the thing about this. You want to cut this little bundle of hair really short. You don't want it very long. And now you're just going to push it down on there, come and get two wraps and flare it right in place. And then pull it back. So now see we got that front half. So now I'm going to come forward. No half hitches, none of that kind of stuff. Come forward, and I'm going to put the hair, right at the halfway point of that little piece in the front. Now, same thing here. Keep it a little short bunch. Come in, push it down around the hook shank. Whoops, my hook moved a little bit. Come and get a couple wraps and flare it right there. And that should take you right about to the front, although that looks a little shy to me. I'm going to just add a little itty bit of yellow there, not very much. So it looks like my front of my hook shank is a little more than I need for my hackle and my wings. Yeah, that looks a little better. All right, so now, again, you got to put a little zap on the thread because to get it to. Okay. So now the first thing with this is come and grab a hold of the tail, okay? And now slide your scissors up along the tail. And this is the hardest part of this fly, I think, is not trimming out your tail. So just work your way around. Keep grabbing your tail and kind of holding on to it so that your scissors slide along the side of it rather than catch the tail fibers. Those guys are being a little stubborn down in there. So I can get it from this side. There we go. Okay, and now I'm just going to come in here and I won't bother razor blading this. I'm just going to trim it back like that. Now you're just putting a little taper on the body is all. Let me get rid of that. That's kind of that errant tail fiber there. There, it's starting to look better. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I am going to let me look in my, okay, oh, I do know where it is. I do know where it is. It's back here. Is it in there? No, it's not. Okay. I would normally use 70 denier. I don't know. For some reason, I thought I brought it with me. I can't find it. But we'll use 140. Okay, so come up here to the front. Let's get a couple of wings. So I'm going to use a whiting winger cape here. It's just a little grizzly cape. So let's just grab a couple of these guys. And so they got a curve on them. I'm going to put the curve back to back to create some wings. Kind of like that. I want my wings to be about 2 times. So I'll come there, come back and strip that. And then try to hold on to these guys back to back. Come in and capture them. Come to that halfway point, pull them forward because you want them sitting. You want the wings ideally. Well, it's a little back, but that's okay. Ideally, you want it right about at the halfway point. Okay. Put a couple of wraps up against it, try to get them to come forward a little bit. Then we'll grab some black Hackle. And because this is a little larger gape than a standard dry fly, and I realized I just forgot something else here. I forgot my hackle gauge. I'm going to hackle it to about a gape to maybe just slightly more. That's, I gotta go way up here. That's way too small. Normally I'd hackle gauge this, but yeah, I think that'll work. So now this one, I'll go ahead and put it on my side with the curve facing towards me this time, right? Because I want to do dry fly style. So I'll just come in and catch that stem. Just use a shorter thread here. Now let's wrap this and see how it looks. And you might want to do a couple hackles if you want a pretty robust, thick hackle. Yeah, that looks pretty good, tackle-wise. I'm finishing this by hand. Yeah, that's not bad. You could maybe add a second hackle to this to make it a little heavier, but there it is. The trick to that one, if you want to tie those, is keep your hair bundles really short. Then when you go in to trim it, the first thing you want to do is get a hold of your tail. Got your tail in your hand, then you can slide your scissors in and get that hair out of the way. Because that's what I always found most challenging with that, is cutting the tail out. You know, trying to trim it without snipping the tail out of it. So if you just keep those little hair bundles really short, it's a great little pattern. I mean, it's a good, pocket water, fast water pattern. You can do it, you can do different colors with it. Guys back in Michigan do those that are about that long for hex. That's their hex pattern. I've seen that.
Sizes, you just said for bigger, but what about for Colorado trout and smaller? How
I would
small
tie them
can you go?
14 and 16s with one bunch of hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could just, on little tiny ones, just do a single bunch of hair. You gauge that. I mean, that's a pretty big hook right there. So you did 2 bunches there. Actually, I did 3 because I had to add a little to that front one because I wasn't, and the proportions on it, whatever size hook, is about half-half. Is, I think, considered pretty standard proportions on it. So, you want to try one more? I know you told me I had a pretty hard deadline.
Hard stop at noon, but yeah, let's go ahead and finish.
Okay, I'm going to do, here's one I want to do for you. That I think, it's a nice pattern. Let me find my stuff here. It is something called a Roberts Drake, and it is a real standard Midwestern fly pattern. You're not going to go into any fly shops back in Michigan and not see this fly in their bins. And I think you can fish it out here in Colorado too. And it's pretty unique. I'll pass a couple around just to make sure. Good, and you can take that one and pass that around. So that's what it looks like. So let's put a hook. This will be pretty quick. It's not a... So what they use these for is they use these for all the big burrowing mayflies, the big flies back there. You tie them really big for hex. I've tied these for green drakes here in Colorado, and just hit the bodies, you know, got to do a kind of a chartreuse body. I'm going to do the standard pattern here, which is oh, geez. Yes, I will. I'll fish this as kind of a searching pattern. Green drakes, you got to have a, well, you can tie them down a little. I've tied little olive ones, but I don't know, you know, I mean, little sparkle duns and things like that are easier to tie and probably just as effective, if not more so. But for Michigan, these are nice patterns. The thing about fishing in Michigan is a lot of your trout fishing happens at dusk and into the dark hours. And so, and this is a 5212. This is the 2 extra long dry fly hook, Tiemco 5212 that I'm tying this on. Okay, so now I've used whiting tailing packs on this, cocktailium, but the traditional pattern calls for pheasant as the pheasant tail as the tail of the fly. So I'm going to get some here and line the tips up before I take them off. And I suppose if you want to be real precise, you do 3, but I'm going to do a few more than that. Keep those tips lined up. And then, you know, again, you want the tail to be the length of the body. So transfer that back, cut it. So come in there and grab that tail and wind it back. And again, you want to come in and set the tail with 1 wrap. That's a pretty standard thing to do on most dry flies, is put that 1 wrap under to kind of set the tail up off the hook shank. Now I'm going to come back up here to about the 2/3 point, maybe a little, just a touch more than halfway. Now, and this is where you can kind of customize whatever color deer here. The thing you want is you want a piece of deer. This is early season deer. You can see how short it is. But the thing about it, it's got really nice, see the even tips on this? This would be great. Hopper hair, that kind of thing. And so, stack this. And here's kind of the unique thing about this pattern is I'm going to lay this bunch of hair along the back. I'm going to line the tips up just a little past my tie-in point, not real far. Switch hands and come here and cut it right where the thread is at. Now I'm going to come in, I'm going to grab those butts, tighten down on them. Now, as I pull back, I'm just kind of doing these loose spiral wraps back to where the tips are. And now I'll flare the tips a little bit. Now I'll come back forward and do some spiral wraps forward. And then tie those butts down. Now I'm going to use some belly hair, but now this is belly hair that's winging hair. It's early season belly. It's not like the belly. This piece would not work for that, even though it's belly hair. It's too late in the season and the hair is too long. The tips have gotten too long and straggly. This one will make a nice little winging. See how much shorter that is? So, you know, when you buy belly hair, there's belly hair for spinning, but then when you want to use deer belly for winging, you gotta find the right stuff. And it's early season belly hair. So I'm gonna stack that. So now I'm going to lay my wing back along here, and I want it to come back right to about the back of the body. I keep the wing a little shorter on this than what maybe a traditional, 2 times the gape would be. Trim that. Then I'm going to come in here. I'm going to grab that with a couple loose wraps and tie down on it, and then hold it up in place there and get those butts tied down in. The thorax of this, you can dub the thorax if you want, but the traditional Roberts Drake just used the thread as a thorax. It didn't use any additional material. Now I'm going to pull that forward, come in here behind it, get a few wraps behind it. Then I'm going to post the wing. That's where we come around. See how I'm staying on top of the hook shank. I'm not pulling real tight, but I'm posting the wing. You don't want it to flare all that much. You just want to kind of gather those fibers together. There we go. Now let me come in and do some more thread wraps and kind of cover up some of these little stray. This would be where if you wanted to dub it, it'd be an easy way to get it cleaned up. Dang it. And all I'm doing is just kind of building a little bit of a thorax there. There we go, that's probably pretty good. Now,
Tim, quick question for you. What scissors are you using on this gear?
these are Soligen.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not cheap. Finally found a guy who could sharpen them in Newcastle. He did a pretty good job on them. What's going on here? Oh, haven't I pulled this out yet? Oh, wow. A new cape.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I hadn't pulled this out yet. Come on out of there without messing up too much of my fibers. The traditional one calls for a brown. I'm going to put a variant on it just to make it a little different. I think the ones I passed around had brown hackle on it. And again, I don't have my hackle gauge, so I'll have to kind of eyeball it. So now when I parachute, I don't parachute out to a gape and a half. I parachute a little smaller than that. Although this extra long hook, you probably could. On a standard dry, I like to undergape it a little bit. That maybe is a little small. There's a Roberts Drake. A Roberts Drake. It's I'm telling you, if you go back and you fish in the Midwest, you will just see this fly. The thing about this pattern is because a lot of times you're fishing right at dusk or near dark, the white wing shows up so you can see it, and it floats well, and it's a good pattern for the brown drakes, the Isonickies, the Hexagenas, all those big burrowing mayflies that you get back there. So it's definitely a pattern that lends itself to a larger mayfly more so than a small mayfly. So I'm going to lay the stem right in here along the front. I think I've seen guys who will tie the feather to the wing and then post down. And I find that to be a little fussy. and the purpose in it is you don't cross your hackle over, so you don't get those splayed out hackles. But I've never found the fish to care that much if I have because I had to cross over one wrap in there so you could try to find it, but then I'm going down, I'm wrapping underneath, and then bring this forward, tie it off. Oh, there's my whip finisher. Go ahead and pull it out for this one. I've used this in the pocket water on the frying pan. I mean, it's a nice little search pattern, even out here. You know, floats pretty well. There it is. I'll let you focus on it.
Pan, did you say? What size do you like on it?
For the green drakes, this one right here is this is a 52-22 size 10, and it's about the right size. You know, the biggest pattern I use for green drakes on the frying pan are sparkle duns. I use sparkle duns all the time. And what I do is I downsize them. I find that a lot of the commercial patterns, they tend to tie them in like size 10s, I think maybe even 8s, I'm not sure. And I tie sparkle duns in 10s and 12s. And the 12 looks small, but the fish eat them, you know. The interesting thing too about the green drake hatch on the frying pan is everybody kind of associates it with when they come off towards the end of July, 1st of August. And the same is true with big mayflies back in Michigan. If you see one brown drake fly by you, just like on the pan, if you see literally one green drake fly by you, put a green drake on, start hitting the riffles with a green drake, and fish will come up and eat it. Yeah, you don't need some big heavy hatch. And they do, and what they will do then is they will begin sporadically hatching off. If fall stays warm enough, I've seen them hatching into late October. Yeah, not many, you know, maybe 3 or 4 pop off, but they're a big enough chunk of food and the fish have been used to seeing them that, I mean, and I'll fish through the runs. The fish will come up through, you know, a foot or 2 of water to come and eat a pattern. Yeah, so, you know, don't be afraid to fish those green drakes if they, yeah.
You got a question, Jeff?
That being the traditional way with the thread thorax, when would you dub it, and what would you dub it with if you were going to dub
Just
the thorax?
a little light dry fly dub that tied into the color. I can tell you in Michigan, here's what they do with them. They tie them in olives. They tie an olive one. They tie what's called for an Isonicky. Isonicky is kind of a little maroon colored, so they dye a little maroon color. Out here for the green drakes, the green drake, the belly, when you look at the belly, they're very chartreuse. And so I'll do it with chartreuse hair out here. And then, and for my green drakes out here, then I'll do a little chartreuse dubbing on the thorax. And just dub them, make them a little more robust pattern. Yeah. You know, but the guys do mess around with them back there too. I've seen guys dubbing them. This is the original Roberts Drake pattern, and in the book I talk about that pattern. If you go in there and read about it, I give a little history on it. And I did it more because, well, they're effective. What's called the Rusty's White Knot. I don't know if you guys know who Rusty Gates was, but Rusty owned Gates Au Sable Lodge. He passed away a few years ago, but he was a real icon in trout unlimited and all that. And the biggest selling fly, Josh Greenberg owns the shop now. Josh is a great guy. He's written a couple books about that area. And his biggest selling one is called a Rusty's White Knot, and it's for the Isonickies. It is that maroon body with the white wing and gray dun colored hackle, and the tail is moose. Yeah, and that's his biggest selling pattern. And that and that kind of coincides. Those Isonickies are hatching off when we do the Trout Unlimited camp, because I teach at the TU youth camp back there, and that's what's the predominant mayfly during the 3rd week or so of June when we're back there for camp. And so I have a whole box full of those things, and the kids can see them too. That's another thing. The kids can see the pattern, so they know it's on the water. Unlike fishing little Griffiths gnats or something, they have a hard time finding them on the water. You know, their leaders don't straighten out and stuff like that.
Teach them with something big and then they go small.
They go small, yeah. So yeah, and we and I will also use tenkara with them, just because if they really have trouble handling the fly rod, I'll just rig them with a tenkara rod and one of those flies and just lift it up and just make it float down the river. And they'll hook little brookies, little 8-9 inch brookies out of the runs and stuff. Anyway.
Do you treat any of these flies with a floating? If so,
all of them.
What do you like?
Oh God, I don't know. Gink, SA. I don't have any like oh, this is my go-to.
Yeah.
It's whatever. Gink is probably the one I have the most of.
Yeah.
Just little dry fly stuff.
Exactly. Great.
Yeah. Now, I don't use on the bass bugs. I use gink, although not like you use it on a dry fly. I literally squirt it on the back and then rub it in like suntan lotion or something, because it just soaks down in there. And once they get waterlogged enough, you just hang them up and go to a fresh fly, because there's just no surviving them. Unlike little dry flies, you can keep them alive keep them floating for a very long time.
Right.
Yeah.
When you were out in Steamboat, did you ever go to Delaney Buttes? And just
All the time.
What would
All
your
the time.
favorite damsel to do it?
We used to use AP nymphs. You know what an AP nymph is? An all-purpose nymph? We used to use AP nymphs. I just tied them in kind of an olive brown. Yeah, in fact, those were some of my best guide trips, because they're so easy, because you go up to Delaney Buttes during damsel hatch, and if you're ever watching, those damsel flies go brrr, and they drop down, brrr, and they drop down. So you'll get on a hard bottom area on the lake, and you'll look out and you'll see these little guys wiggling, and you'll just cast your fly out. You'll sit, pretty soon here comes like a 20-inch brown down the bank, and he gets, about maybe that far from your fly, and you give it one little pop and hook the fish. Bam. The problem is this is a really short window of time that happens. It's not a big long period of time, but that was one of my go-to periods of guiding there, is take them up to Delaney Buttes. And I'll tell you another place to go if you're familiar with that. Have you ever been up to Arapahoe Lakes? Okay. See, now I'm telling secrets, but that's okay. When you come from Steamboat over Muddy Pass and you're dropping down into North Park, okay? You're heading out, Delaney's out there to your, you look back up to your right, you'll see those mountains back up in there. Up in there to the right is a group of lakes called Arapahoe Lakes. No, it's just right up there. It's on the front side. When you see those cliffs and stuff up there, they're down below those cliffs. They're in North Park. There's a series of, there's Cliff Lake, Two Ledge, Disappointment, which is not a disappointment unless it gets fished out. The thing about those lakes, what happens is they get fished out, and then, because they're open lakes, they used to be, this was years ago, to bait fishing. So the word to get out, the big fish were back, and then they go get fished out, and there wouldn't be many fish. Then people would stop fishing them, then the fish would come back. The thing about those lakes is they had scuds like crazy. I mean, they were just loaded with food. So the trout grew big really quick. But those are, if you want a two ledge, takes a little work to get into it. Cliff, you can not quite drive to, but almost. And Disappointment is like from Cliff, it's like a little quarter-mile hike back to it. Disappointment's a little itty-bitty lake. I mean, it's not much bigger than this shop is, but it's, if you hit it at the right time. Well, you go down, what is the highway that goes up into North Park? It's not 40.
Well, 125 goes over from Granby to Northport.
No.
Can I interrupt for
Oh,
one
you need to-
second?
you need to
we
wrap us
cut,
up,
But
yeah.
because it would be remiss if I did not tell you to give this book a little bit of plug. So if you could just give us like maybe 45 seconds on the book.
Okay.
A minute on the book. Yeah,
All right.
And we're gonna have to close.
Okay, so the book was published in 2018. It's kind of a deer hair. It covers deer hair with pretty much all the uses for deer hair I could come up with. It's the back section is all the big spun deer hair. I think the main section of this book is, I believe it's chapter 5. It's the techniques for working with deer hair. The front half of the book talks about hair wing duns, hoppers, muddlers, all those kind of patterns that you use with little spun deer hair heads, and then deer hair wings. And then the second half of the book is all the stacking techniques and the big deer hair bass bugs. I include both floating flies, popper flies like I tied today, plus diving flies, and then a couple of big. Also, there's a section on bucktail. It's less comprehensive. There's been entire books written about bucktails, but there's a section in here on bucktail and working with bucktail. So it's just kind of a overall deer hair book and techniques with deer hair. So
Awesome. You did great
thank you.
on that. Hey, thank you very much. Thanks.
You're
This
welcome.
was really, really good.
You're welcome.
Definitely
Thank
will be
you
going
for-
back to this video and
Okay.
checking it out.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys for coming, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. So, if you liked what you saw on YouTube, or and obviously you guys can go back and watch this video over and over again. So, if you liked what you saw, subscribe, like, that helps us out. So, hey, thank you very much. Until next time, go out and catch some fish.